And whatever feedback that is very, very meaningful for us also, and it means a lot. Yes.
I still can't see Manisha from if she's joined, but yeah,
She has joined.
I'll see her.
So just tell her to drop in a message, na, so we
I
know.
think I did tell her.
Can just drop in a message on the chat so we know that it's her. We'll make her a host. So,
Hi, I think she's here. I am just, yes. Miss Manisha, Miss Manisha,
Yeah.
yeah, are you able to unmute now?
Should I unmute myself?
yeah,
You
yeah.
are on mute already. You are unmuted already. We can hear you fine.
Okay. You've made her a co-host.
I did, I did. Done.
So just in time, I think we can start now. Yeah.
Okay. So, first and foremost, good afternoon, everybody. I am Fiona, and I'm a dietitian at Kokila Bain Dhirubhai Ambani Hospital. And today, I would just like to welcome all of you all to our very, very interesting topic on the biochemistry of cravings. Now, let me just begin with a very simple question. How often have your patients said that I just can't control my cravings? And how often have we just dismissed it by just saying, or thinking it as like a lack of willpower? But today we are here to challenge that narrative, because cravings are just not behavioral, they are biological messages, signals that are shaped by neurochemistry, hormones, metabolism, and even the micronutrient status in the body. Uh, we have with us a very exceptional panel of clinicians who will help us decode these cravings, not as a problem, but as a clinical clue, which is going to help with the patient with, counseling as well. Now, whether it is late night sugar cravings, PMS related chocolate urges, stress induced snacking, or even unexplained salt cravings, these are not random, they are patterns. And today we are going to learn to interpret those patterns. Over the next 2 hours, we will move step by step, where we will be understanding what cravings truly are, what is the brain's role in explore in these cravings, what are the hormones and metabolic triggers that are there, what are the hidden micronutrient deficiencies. We'll also be recognizing the different psychological and environmental influences, and finally, how to put all of this into practice. So, whenever we talk about theory, is one part, how to put this exact theory into practice, what are the ways where you'll be able to help your patients out practically, we'll be looking at that as well. So, I would encourage you not to just listen, but connect this with your patients. Now, to begin with, we must first and foremost clarify what we are actually dealing with. Is it actually hunger? Is the appetite? Is appetite the same as craving? So to help us build this foundation, I would want to invite our HOD, Ms. Bhakti Rahul Saman. She is going to help us distinguish between hunger, appetite, cravings, and more importantly, help us understand why cravings are the biochemical signals and not just habits. Now, all of us know who she is. We all know that she does not need an introduction, but I'm just going to put up a slide for her. Just give me a minute. I'm just going to share my slide with her. Is my slide visible?
Yeah.
Yes.
So we have with us Bhakti ma'am. She is a chief dietitian of our hospital, Kokilaben Dhirubhai Ambani Hospital. She's an RD. She's SPNLLL teacher, and she also has her SPNLLL diploma. She's also the vice president of IPEN, and she has multiple awards to her name, multiple publications and affiliations as well. So I would want to invite ma'am to do a basic context setting for us and help us understand what exactly are we dealing with today.
Thank you, Fiona, so much for that introduction. And thank you, all of you all, for this overwhelming response. We already have around 275 members who've joined with us. And thank you for that quick introduction. Now, coming to the part of the context. I mean, I think before we start learning about it, I wanted to just, give you a gist about the content, a context to start off with. So, we know briefly that cravings are not a discipline problem. There is a certain biological problem here, and we need to identify this problem and not mislabel a patient when it comes to, wrong solutions, or give them or start off with the wrong solution. So, for that, one thing is very, very important is to first thing is to, clear out this understanding or clear out this confusion, that before we go deeper, that there is a confusion which sets in, and that confusion starts with that not all eating is the same. We need to keep that in mind, and that is exactly what we have to do or explain to our patients. There are three different drivers when it comes to eating. One is the hunger, the other is the appetite, and third is the craving. So now clinically they are not interchangeable, each one is different. But in real life, what happens is with most of our patients, they are not able to identify whether it's hunger, appetite, or craving, and everything is mixed up altogether. So it's very important first to get that base very clear, that when we talk of hunger, it's actually physiological, right? It is your body's need, the way your body is going to ask you for energy. So it builds gradually. It comes with a signal from the stomach, with a growling, a low energy, and most importantly, any food can satisfy your hunger, right? So that's what hunger is. Now, when we look at appetite, now appetite is more psychological. Okay, you see food, you smell food, someone else is eating, and suddenly you feel like eating too, right? So even if you are not truly hungry, you can get influenced maybe by the environment or the habit or the culture, and honestly, that's very, very normal, right? And when we talk of cravings, so cravings are different, and that's what we are going to explore today. When we say cravings, they are very, very specific, intense, and often urgent. So it's not, I want food. It's, I want something sweet right now, or I want something salty right now. So it's not the need, right? And the key point here is that cravings are driven by neurochemistry, hormones, and metabolism. and not just dependent on the choice that you want, right? So when a patient says, I want chocolate every evening, they are not describing a habit. Maybe they are describing a pattern. And the real problem is in practice. That is where we as dietitians or as clinical nutritionists sometimes go wrong. We can go wrong, right? So we respond with maybe, yes, please avoid sugar, control yourself, or just simply follow what I'm telling you, right? But let's think about it this way, that if a body is biochemically wired to crave something, how long will willpower actually win? Isn't that interesting? So, we are going to look at it with a scientific curiosity today. So, instead of asking, why is the patient not following a diet, we should be asking, what is actually driving this craving? Or which system is interrelated here, which is actually causing a dysregulation? Because cravings are not random, they are signals, and the signals are coming from different parts of the body. It can come from the brain, it can be maybe because of some hormones, it can be because of blood sugar fluctuations. We did have a lot of poll questions and the answer was blood sugar variability. It can be gut microbiome, or it can also be simply some micronutrient deficiencies. So basically, if you go to see, the entire system is talking, and if we ignore this, we see a very familiar cycle in OPD, right? Patient will say, okay, I have a certain craving. You would say, no, you need to restrict this. There will be a point where the patient will lose control. He will end up overeating. Then there is a guilt and repeat and so on. And to some part or to some extent, what happens is that the patient start believing that something is wrong with them, right? In fact, even we start believing that, oh, this patient doesn't have that much of willpower, so let me not get onto that part. But actually, nothing is wrong with the patient, and maybe this approach is also incomplete. So let's flip this completely today. So I would say, if I have to say, cravings are not an enemy. I think it is more like a feedback. What is the feedback? Your body's way of saying that maybe something is imbalanced, something needs attention. And our job is to not suppress that craving, it is to decode them. And that's exactly what we are going to do today in this session, where we are going to break it down step by step. Like she's already mentioned, Fiona has already mentioned about our different speakers and the different topics that they are going to cover about. So we're going to start from understanding the brain, the neurochemistry, hormones, metabolisms, and finally how we can actually manage all of them together in practice. So the next time a patient tells you that I can't control my cravings, instead of thinking compliance issues, we start thinking that what is their biology trying to tell us? Let's begin by understanding the brain behind this. Or before we even understand craving better, we don't just improve the diets. So I think the entire point of trying to understand this is because it is going to help us to improve adherence of the patient to the diet, overall outcome in the in the patient, and in short, you are just building or helping the patient to boost confidence. So that's exactly why this topic and why this narrative. And on that note, I would like to just give the podium to our speakers. So Fiona, you can take it over from here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I don't think anybody else would have been more apt for us to actually make us understand what exactly is the difference between your appetite, hunger, cravings. And now that we actually are, beginning to understand how exactly these differ and what exactly our response should be towards the patient, or how we should be understanding towards the patient, it gives us a better or a clearer lens to interpret the patient experiences also, which make their lives easier and our lives easier as well. Now that we actually understand the difference between them, let's explore where these begin. So they basically begin in the brain. Now, why does this stress push someone towards sugar, or why does the dopamine drive reward seeking behavior? All of this ultimately leads back to one organ, that's your brain. So, to decode this, I invite Miss Vaidehi Navate to walk us through the neurochemistry of cravings. A short introduction on her. Miss Vaidehi is the chief dietitian and head. Okay, I think I'm not sharing my screen. Just a second. Yeah, is it visible now? Yeah, so Miss Vaidehi is the chief dietitian and head at the medical nutrition therapy department of Bhakti Vedanta Hospital and Research Institute. She's also the founder of Integrated Medicine Department. She has over almost 3 decades of experience. She is the pioneer in establishing the MNT department in the hospital. She has a lot of specialization. She has multiple speaker, trainer, and community health advisor under her belt as well. And she's also a certified diabetes educator. She's authored multiple books and research papers as well, and a lot of publications in terms of articles under her name. She's also a recipient of the Special Appreciation by Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam Award and the Carrier of Legacy Award by Bhakti Vedanta Hospital. We welcome you, Vaidehi ma'am, and over to you.
Thank you so much. And first of all, congratulations to Bhakti, Fiona, and your entire team. First is for selecting such a wonderful topic. Wonderful topic. In fact, I myself got so much interested. And secondly, actually, we're talking about science. So it's a wonderful thing. So I'll just share my PPT and then we can start. Okay. Is it visible?
Yes, ma'am, it's visible. Only thing is, I would want to request you to. Yes, perfect.
Perfect. Okay. So, as Bhakti correctly said, that we have to speak about the science because every alternate reel will talk about don't eat sugar and don't eat fast foods. But as qualified dietitians, we have all the right, first of all, to understand and apply what is the root cause, where the things are going wrong, and how we can help the patient so that we have the results on a permanent basis and not temporary results. So today I'll be talking about certain 5 types of cravings, including stress, sleep deprivation, micronutrient craving, hormonal cravings, and gut microbiome cravings. But little biochemistry I'll be touching upon when I speak about GABA, dopamine, and serotonin pathways and gustatory network. So, craving is a condition, basically a physical condition that has a physical and psychological or behavioral aspect, then it becomes a condition. When does it become an addiction? When it is not a problem and it is beyond management and it becomes like an addiction, like how we have the addiction for the drug and alcohol, and it becomes a complication when we have the result in the form of the obesity and diabetes and CVD kind of diseases, and in fact certain cancers also can be caused because of this. So let us understand before the patient approaches to the complication how we can judge the condition and accordingly work on it. So when in the regular hunger cycles, what happens at the gut level and what happens at the brain level? So when the appetite cycle is regular, then at gut level it is regular, ghrelin rises normally, hypothalamus regulates the hunger well, satiety hormones like GLP-1 and leptin are working perfectly to make the patient stop eating. Then healthy diet, good sleep, low stress, and balanced appetite and digestion. This is what we see when the cycle is going on perfectly. But when the cycle gets disbalanced, then there is something called as at gut level, the action becomes irregular or weak. Then hunger signals, there may be too much or too little hunger in this thing, ghrelin or leptin getting secreted. Then at brain level, the signal becomes confused, and after eating, the weak satiety leading to the overeating, and the diet leading to this type of cycle is basically the junk food and poor sleep and stress. And result is obviously it is craving, overeating, and poor digestion. So everything, it is not at the intake level where I eat less or I eat more, it happens at gut and brain level as well, what we have to think about. So this is a flow, what the way it goes, like craving for foods high in refined carbohydrates, fat and salt. What is the quick effect? That the rapid digestion leading to the spike in the blood sugar and insulin. What is the brain response? It activates the reward center, that is the feel good memory stored, and hormones involved are insulin, cortisol, dopamine, leptin and ghrelin, and result is repeated cravings, preference for the same food over the healthy food options. The triggers are stress or poor sleep or stronger cravings. Basically, the comfort food effect happens. The long-term cycle leading to the craving, from craving to overeating to less fullness and to more craving. So it's a vicious cycle which goes on. And the outcome is addiction-like behavior, weight gain and disturbed digestion and so on. So first I will be speaking about the gustatory system. So little biochemistry. So even I was happy to, go through again the entire cycles, but I'll try to make it simplified. So we have, obviously we are aware that we have the taste centers which are there on our tongue, and there are different areas in the form of the papillae which perceive the taste. So whether we eat sweet food or salty food, so that gets perceived there. But we understand that it is on the tongue itself. But then these centers are the appetite perception, the taste perception centers are available on palate, on the pharynx, on the epiglottis, as well as on the upper one-third part of the esophagus. So this entire areas are actually covered which perceive the taste of the food. And for that perception, the food has to be available in such areas for the little extra time in the sense, that's why we advise patients that chew food well, because if those appetite centers are, these taste centers are not activated, they will not get sensitized. And let's see how the entire system then will work over here. So we have, basically I'll be talking about 5 major tests, where for example sweet, what does basically it is, it sensitizes the sugar, that is basically carbohydrates. I will not be talking about the foods, but sweet, what it detects is the sugar, and role in the body is basically provides energy and encourages the caloric intake. The salty stuff basically maintains the fluid balance, detecting the sodium level, especially in all the minerals, and it is required for the nerve and muscle activation. The sour, that is basically the acids which detect the acidity and may signal the spoilage of the food. Bitter is basically potential toxins. So basically it helps to get rid of the toxins which may be formed, and if they are not, we don't get rid of them, then we label the patient as fatty liver grade 1, 2, 3, and it warns against the harmful accumulation of the toxic substances. And umami is basically the amino acid detection. It supports the growth and tissue repair. So the first thing what we learned is, what we have to understand, the adequate chewing to get this taste bud sensitized. And once those tests are available, these are sensitized, we have the combination of the taste which have to be included. So when we say no sugar, it can be no sugar for sure, but extreme, like entire deletion of the sweet taste, then can have other adverse effect. So as a dietitian, we have to have the balance in planning the diet, where there is a balance of all those food taste. Now, so exactly how the flow goes. First of all, the detection of the taste via taste bud. The taste receptors which are present, the food chemicals get dissolved in the saliva, they act on the receptors, and the signal becomes the nerve impulse, and that is carried forward to the brain, where through the neural pathway, where cranial nerves leading to the transferring it to the brain stem, then to the thalamus, and the entire taste perception, that is gustatory cortex, gets activated. And how the brain is involved here, that hypothalamus and amygdala is basically an area where the taste in terms of the memory and emotions is stored. So that way the entire flow of the food happens, from ingestion of the food till it is realized in the brain exactly what is this. So food intake, tongue detects, taste bud activation, signal sent to the brain, dopamine gets released, what we call as a pleasure chemical. Brain interprets whether it is pleasant, unpleasant, and decision is made whether eat more or avoid. So when this entire system is balanced, what Bhakti said, it becomes the appetite. But when it gets disbalanced, then what we say that it gets converted to the cravings. So this is about the taste when the ingestion of the food is concerned. So we will be talking about the neurotransmitters, exactly how neurotransmitters are involved in the food craving. This may look little complicated, but I'll make it simplified. So understand once the stimulate, so basically once the food is ingested, by the time the brain understands, I think somebody has, okay. So by the time the stimulus is ingested or the brain understands or perceives the taste, there is a chain of the reactions what is happening at the neuron level as well as at the receptor level. And the chain is working so beautifully where certain neurons will activate the receptors, they will block the receptors, and they may disinhibit the receptors. So that way the entire chain will decide whether I should have the craving for this particular food or I should not be having the craving. So when we, let's see which brain regions are involved in the craving. So first is the hypothalamus, where hunger and energy balance happens. Second is the ventral tegmental area, where the dopamine release happens. Third is a nucleus accumbens, which is a reward center. And fourth is amygdala, where the emotional memory, whether pleasant, unpleasant, that gets stored. And the last but not least is basically prefrontal cortex, where the impulse control happens. So it may give you the perfect signal to stop or stop eating, or it may aggravate the craving. So these are the areas which are involved in the brain. For us, I just feel like eating sweet and something is popped in, but understand, so such a complicated chain reaction going on in the brain. And this repeated stimulation, if it are happening the way I just mentioned right now, it leads to the craving pathways. So this is a craving triad where the stress, let's take the example of the stress. When the stress is on the higher side, the cortisol gets aggravated, it goes up, and then that leads to the increased appetite and craving for certain foods. Now, high cortisol will lead to the low GABA and it will lead to low serotonin. Low GABA gets aggravated if it along with the stress, there is low magnesium level. That is the mineral which, if at all, is deficient, and also poor sleep. So stress is not there, magnesium levels are perfect, but poor sleep also can lead to the low GABA. So what happens when high cortisol, low GABA, and low serotonin? So what happens? Basically, there is an increased anxiety and stress. There is impulsive eating for comfort. So we have to make sure that the anxiety goes down at the brain level, and that is what is understood, that I am supposed to eat something, what we call as comfort food. And a patient eats, that is called, the patient enters into something called as carbohydrate appetite drive. I'll just explain that in the next slide. And then that releases the feel good neurotransmitter. Actually, ideally it should be releasing that feel good neurotransmitter, but because of the high cortisol, this does not get released and the craving cycle goes on. So it is a triad, what we call, where high cortisol, low GABA, and low serotonin leads to the craving scenario. Serotonin and mood eating, basically serotonin is needed for regulation of mood and satiety, and low serotonin level is linked with the carbohydrate craving. Carbohydrate increase the tryptophan entry into the brain, and that leads to the temporary mood improvement. So person may feel that I am totally in anxiety and I eat a piece of Cadbury and I feel good. So where we cannot leave the patient stop eating Cadbury and continue with their anxiety, it does not happen that way. So we have to understand, basically person feels good, that is a temporary mood improvement, and that is directly related to the serotonin. This is what I was talking about, the carbohydrate brain circuit. So just understand a simple patient scenario where strong craving for the carbohydrate, especially sugary or starchy food, happens, feeling tired or low energy. These are the symptoms which normally patients will come to us. What are the clinical clues? Where the increased carbohydrate craving, especially during stress or fatigue, difficulty controlling intake of sweets and bread. And what is our dietitian strategy is encouraging the balanced meal with protein, healthy fats and fiber, stabilizing the blood sugar with the regular meal intervals, and limiting the refined carbohydrates, added sugars if possible, or in certain cases completely avoiding, and supporting mood and energy through the nutrient dense food. So rather than stopping the sugar completely, this is what we have to understand exactly what happens in the brain when there is a craving for the carbohydrate. Now, this another cycle which talks about the serotonin, where low GABA level, which is directly related, low GABA is basically related to the emotional eating, and that is directly related to the magnesium deficiency. So, low GABA will lead to the emotional eating. Emotional eating will temporarily give rise to the serotonin, what I just mentioned, but that just temporary. But there is a blood sugar crash, there is a mood dip, and there's more craving. So this is the vicious cycle which happens, and the patient is not able to come out of this. So once we understand the mechanism behind low GABA and behind the low serotonin level, we understand exactly how to deal with it. So low GABA, I just mentioned what happens in terms of low serotonin. When the carbohydrate are ingested, there's an increased insulin release, leading to the increased tryptophan in the blood, again which will lead to the temporary rise in the serotonin level. So what Bhakti correctly mentioned, that we cannot speak only about the willpower. It is not something, it is connected to psychology, but it has a science. So cravings are often a neurochemical signal, and it is not just the lack of willpower. So a flow. Role of GABA is basically primary inhibitory neurotransmitter which maintains the calm relaxation impulse control. When GABA is low, brain gets more excited. There is more tendency of emotional eating, poor impulse control. Behavioral impact is basically reduced emotional resolution, increased anxiety and restlessness, triggering for low GABA, chronic stress, sleep deprivation, magnesium deficiency, and the craving pattern further leads to seeking for quick calming relief, preference for sugar and processed food. And once this cycle gets formed of all these neurotransmitters, there is a temporary relief, brief calming, but there is no root cause correction, and the anxiety returns. And this is actually the eating loop. It is called as repeated craving eating loop. When the patient enters in this loop, then we should be there to tackle this. Dopamine craving, again the same thing happens like food cue or anticipation. Dopamine release, reward sensation, behavior reinforced, stronger future craving. So when we talk about all those neurotransmitters, the basic understanding is all those neurotransmitters will make a patient eat or crave for particular things, but the relief, whatever positive relief patient gets, it is just a temporary relief. And as a dietitian, we have to go to the root cause. So third part, I'll be talking about the cravings. Now this is our interesting part. Biochemical is
Okay,
slightly,
ma'am. I'm
yes,
so sorry to interrupt, but I would just want to remind you of the time. We are on a time constraint,
yes.
and
So I have another 5 to 7 minutes. That is fine.
5 minutes, yeah, and then we would want to
Perfect.
say,
Because
I'm so sorry to interrupt,
no
but
problem. Fiona, I can understand. So we just spoke about the biochemistry part, which is a little bit, at least for me, it is a little bit complicated. But let's talk about in the dietitian's language. So craving etiology. So cravings are often biological signals of imbalance. Imbalance where? In brain neurotransmitters, hormones, micronutrients, sleep cycle, and gut microbiome. So we analyze those 5 root causes. We can give the targeted nutrition intervention rather than simple restriction. So stress craving is basically cortisol going up, increased appetite, enhancing dopamine reward seeking, promotes the preference for the energy dense food like the cheesy and buttery foods. And common cravings are sweet, chocolate, fried foods, and bakery foods. So what happens? High work stress, evening emotional eating, people feel more hungry towards evening, night snacking. Clinical clues is cravings increase with stress and temporary relief after eating. What should be our strategy? That meals every 3 to 4 hours, magnesium rich food, adaptogenic foods, and stress regulation practice. Second, we have sleep deprivation, where ghrelin goes up and leptin goes down, where common cravings for the sugary caffeine foods and refined carbohydrate and fast food. And here, basically, it happens in the patients with who are late sleepers, shift workers, and parents of young children. Dietitian strategy is basically protein-rich breakfast, balanced evening meal, limiting caffeine after 3 p.m., especially for such patients, and sleep rhythm correction is something which is expected. Third is micronutrient deficiencies and craving. Common deficiencies that worsen craving is magnesium, zinc, B vitamins, and proteins. And when I talk about B vitamins, I have not covered all the micronutrients, but B vitamin, basically craving happens for the chocolate or the salty snacks and sugar. Fatigue, hair fall, menstrual irregularity, restrictive diets. This is a typical patient's profile, and our strategy should be nutrient dense meals, seeds, nuts, legumes, and mineral repletion. Hormonal craving, which happens around the luteal phase, where serotonin goes down and insulin sensitivity changes, where the magnesium rich foods, complex carbohydrate, protein snack, and omega-3 fats. So we can actually cover all those hormone related cravings. And the last and most important is gut microbiome, where gut bacteria influences cravings through the gut brain axis. When sugar loving bacteria dominate, the craving increases, where as a dietitian we should be promoting fiber rich foods to support healthy gut bacteria, limiting or avoiding sugars and refined carbohydrates, and encouraging pre-probiotics to stabilize the appetite. Just quickly, I'll go through this case study. When patient coming to us with persistent food craving, daytime fatigue, and energy dips, this is commonly observed. The clinical interpretation is basically blood sugar instability, inadequate protein distribution, possible magnesium deficiency, disturbed circadian rhythm, and and the understanding, the strategy what has to be implemented is maximizing protein intake, magnesium correction of the circadian rhythm, mechanical. Then the rationale which is involved is, like, I will not go into detail about the rationale, but the outcome will happen where there is a noticeable reduction in the cravings and improving gut stability. And clinical insight is cravings are often a biochemical signal. So how can we break the craving cycle? Maintain the meal rhythm, ensure adequate protein, stabilize blood glucose, improve sleep, stress regulation practices, correct macronutrient deficiencies. Obviously, it is completely individualized what we should be taking care for. Happy, pleasant eating without cravings. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. That indeed was such an in-depth and such a wonderful way to actually let us understand the difference, or at least the biochemistry. I mean, I always had a difficult time connecting different things in biochemistry, but you made it so easy for us to understand. And also, when you broke it down step by step, it was very informative. And it was basically, it helped us to actually connect the dots between what exactly the cravings are, where do they stem from, and how does the brain or our neurotransmitters play a big role in it. Now from the brain, we now shift to hormones and metabolism, because that is what the next step will always come in. Your brain releases, and this is what they are, the factors that are going to also play a big role in this. So from the brain, we shift now to hormones and metabolism. Now, cravings are generally strongly influenced by the hormonal signals, whether it is insulin, whether it is ghrelin, leptin, or any of the female hormones as well. They are mainly all driven by the hormones that are there. So now, to decode this exact interplay between the hormones and the cravings, I would want to invite Ms. Swati Sadhan, who will connect the appetite, hormones, blood sugar dynamics, and cravings in a practical way. I would just want to give us a short introduction for her. Ms. Swati is a chief dietitian at the Apollo Hospital, Pune. She also has 16 years of experience and is an expert in handling chronic medical conditions through effective nutrition. She is an MSc RD and also a certified diabetes educator. She's also a certified functional nutritionist, a national RD trainer, and she's also had a variety of speaker, organizer, delegate roles as well throughout in multiple conferences. She also believes in the healing power of nutrition. Ms. Swati, welcome, and I would want to hand over the session to you.
Thank you, Fiona. Thank you for that extensive introduction. I'll just share my screen and we'll start the presentation. Is the screen visible?
Yes, if you could just put it in your, yes, perfect.
Perfect. All right, fine. Good afternoon, one and all. And Vaidya has done a phenomenal job and put me in a much tougher job to explain it further. So let's just start away. So as Bhakti said, there is first hunger, then there is appetite, and then there is craving stage. All right, very much interlinked with one another, and all of these are driven with these two phases of hunger. So hunger is regulated by two phases, which is nothing but a homeostatic regulation, meaning you eat a food. There is a physiological reward given to the brain, and from the brain, there is a balance of two phases. One is the hunger phase where your calorie requirements are used up, maintained, and a homeostasis is achieved, a balance is achieved. Second is a hedonic phase, which is a reward eating, or the person will want to eat something which is more satisfying for that person. And that phase is called as a hedonic phase. What happens here is it is nothing but a reward based eating where a pleasure feeling or the satiety or a dopamine rush is experienced. Now, what happens here when a person eats more of ultra processed food or calorie dense food, the supra physiological reward is being given, and because of which the hedonic phase overrides the homeostatic phase. So, your balance is gone and you are wanting more of the reward eating. Okay, you are wanting more of the dense calories or the quick calories or more of salty foods, and that is where there is impaired metabolism, there is impaired regulation of the hormones on the chemical balance, and that leads to the weight gain. Now we will see in parts how this hedonic and the homeostatic phase is gone for a toss, where we have the clients in OPD or in the clinical setup which say that they have a lot of craving or they do not feel satiated even if they eat a lot and frequently. So cravings, it's a strong desire to eat food. It is not a need, it is not a requirement, but this is a urge. And unless and until the patient or the person eats that, the person will not feel satisfied. That is what craving is. There are various triggers for cravings. One is a physical craving. After seeing a particular thing, you want to eat it. Emotional craving, yes, of course, emotions, a strong source of trigger for the cravings. There is hormonal change. We are going to see that in details because my topic is about the hormonal drivers for cravings. We will see that in bits and pieces. And the stress, of course, because fatigue or the stress, it increases the cortisol hormone, which is given by the adrenal gland, and that activates actually the fight and flight mechanism, the adrenal dysfunction, which impairs the adrenal hormones, and the person craves more for the salty food, or the person craves more for the sugary food items, or the high fat food which give a reward feeling, a dopamine rush to the person. So these hormonal regulators are divided into two main groups, orexogenic, and I'll just arrange my slide, and an orexogenic. Orexogenic is nothing but the hormones which trigger the satiety or the food intake in the body. And exactly opposite to that is the appetite suppressors or anaerogenic chemicals, hormones which suppress the hunger levels. Okay, naturally, as we go ahead, you will realize the human body is naturally designed in a way where the appetite inducing hormones are less in the body and the appetite suppressors are naturally more in the body. But with the wrong dietary habits, we trigger the part 2 more, and the person ends up having cravings more and more every day. All right, so let us see one by one each of these. In orexogenic, there is glucocorticoids. They increase the intake of fatty food. These are all triggers, okay? More is the secretion, more is the trigger, either for appetite suppression or for appetite increasing. All right. So more is a secretion of, more will be the trigger for satiety or for appetite. Glucocorticoids, these are actually responsible for increasing the intake of fatty food. The person will crave more for the fatty foods. In in the end, it is going to cause more of TG formation, triglycerides, and adipose tissue. Ghrelin, very well talked about. Ghrelin and leptin we hear a lot. It's a hunger hormone, we all call it as. What is the role? Ghrelin is secreted by the stomach, the duodenum. All the GI tract has all these hormonal secretions. So as the food comes into the GI tract, it is digested, it is passing down the GI tract. These hormones will be secreted. In the upper GI, the hunger hormones. Lower GI, the satiety hormones. As the food passes down, it is going to give a signal of satiety that stop eating, we have enough of calories. Okay, so ghrelin, it is secreted by the stomach, the small intestine, and even the large intestine. It increases before the meals. Whenever the stomach shrinks in size, it contracts. The secretion of ghrelin is more. The food comes in, the stomach enlarges, the cells stretch, and the leptin secretion starts. That gives a signal to my brain that, okay, I'm enough with the food and the quantity and the calories. I do not need any more food. And then the satiety signal is given. So physiologically, it is designed so beautifully naturally. When I was reading about it, I was like, human body is phenomenal. It's just that we do not understand the body much and we go by the theory, but experience will teach us more. So when the stomach shrinks, you're fasting for long duration, not eating food, definitely ghrelin will start secreting. When the stomach is full, leptin will start secreting and the satiety signal will be given. More to add to this is estrogen, female reproductive hormone, of course produced by men also, but it is more active in the women. We are going to see how it plays a role in secretion and controlling the appetite. Testosterone, the male reproductive hormone. For anorexigenic or appetite suppressants, peptide YY secreted. Again, you notice where are they secreted? Peptide YY. All of these are appetite suppressants. Where are they secreted? Ileum, colon, small intestine, duodenum. Okay. Released after eating. Oxyntomodulin, it is released after or during the eating and it inhibits the food absorption. It suppresses the ghrelin secretion basically. Leptin, a satiety hormone, very well known. We are going to see each of these in the later slides. It gives a satiety signal and it reduces the body fat mass. Please understand, more is the fat content in the body, more is the leptin level in the body. It is directly proportional to the fat hormone, fat cells in the body. Okay. Then the next one is my slides. Okay. Next is GLP-1. We are going to see this also, the glucagon-like peptide and cholecystokinins, and then secreting the CKKA. All of these, all of us have in the body, well secreted. Okay. Now, as Bhakti said, and even Vaidehi mentioned, neurons and the hypothalamus is the main center for this. As the physiological changes are happening here, the food coming in, going out, emptying, based on that, a signal is given to the brain, and with that, the respective hormones will be secreted by the body to achieve the homeostasis. When the homeostasis is overtaken by the cravings or the hedonic, then this balance goes for a toss. Okay. Now, this image tells us which hormone is secreted at which part of the gut. Majority of it you see small intestine, some of them in the colon, some of them in the fundus or the stomach. Now let us understand ghrelin. Understand all of the hormones are polypeptide chains. These are amino acid chains, either 28, 35, 40 amino acids linked together. Okay. Now during the fasting, it rises. There is rise in it during fasting or even during the calorie restriction. So extreme calorie restriction people, we should be cautious about ghrelin. There is a drop while after eating or getting the satiety levels. Someone is dragging on the drawing on the slides. I request to please avoid that. So what is the role of ghrelin? It stimulates the appetite. It controls the release of growth hormone also, because growth hormone, when it is high, it is going to demand more of calories. Intake will be more. And if it is not used up properly, there will be fat accumulation. So ghrelin, very important hormone when you have to control or manage the weight of a client, or even for the teenagers, this is an important hormone to address. All right, it promotes the fat storage, energy intake, increasing the growth hormone, and it influences the energy homeostasis, because whenever there is deprivation of energy, ghrelin is going to be more active. The hypothalamus part is covered by Vaidhi. I'm not going there. Coming to leptin, leptin exactly opposite role of ghrelin. Okay, now leptin is synthesized in the adipose tissue. More is the adipose tissue, more is the leptin level. It is a satiety hormone. Okay, it suppresses the appetite. Whenever the fat cells are full of calories, leptin is secreted. All right, and it says that enough of energy intake, we are okay with the energy level. Okay, so whenever the fat cells are full of leptin, the leptin release is increased, and it gives a signal to the brain that reduce the appetite. All right. When the appetite goes down, the food intake goes down, the energy level goes down, the leptin release is also lesser, and that reduces the fat storage. So it increases the energy expenditure, it reduces the appetite, it gives satiety, and it enhances the use of fat cells in the body. All right. Now, there are two important terms in terms of clients we handle. There is leptin resistance and there is leptin deficiency. Leptin resistance meaning the body produces good amount of leptin. It is still secreted, but it is not active enough at the cellular level. All right. So the adipose tissue is high, leptin level is high, and still the person is hungry or having lot of appetite. Okay, the appetite is not suppressed. That is less activity of leptin, leptin resistance. What is leptin deficiency? The leptin itself is produced less. When will this happen? When the fat cells are extremely low, right? Meaning there is extreme calorie restriction. When there is extreme calorie restriction, there is extreme fat cell reduction in the body. That is also going to trigger extreme hunger, because too less leptin, too less satiety. Right? So you have to be very, very careful in understanding the cases when extremely calorie restricted diet or cachexic patient, underweight patient, the leptin levels. Just check on the fat mass. Okay. The patient is reducing the weight, still feeling hungry. What is the reason? Check the fat mass. The fat mass is directly connected with the leptin levels, and then you can work out on the energy balance or planning the meals for that client. The next important hormone is nothing but, you will have to tell me. We all have the client saying all of this to us in the OPDs. Can I have ice cream or fries or burger or shakes? Summer is around, so the beverages, right? And we say kabhi kabhi. That's the safest answer, diplomatic answer. Sometimes in limited quantity, all of us can have it. Who is the game changer for all of this? I always think hormones are the game changers for us, because they control everything at the back end, not really visible, but they are the controllers, or maybe the director of the movie, right? So, for all of this, insulin is the game changer. All right. So, let us understand. We saw ghrelin, hunger, leptin, satiety. Let us see what insulin does to us when it comes to cravings. Let us see the normal physiology. I would request all of you to focus on the blue arrows. So whenever there is increase in the blood sugar level, either because your glycogen stores are broken down and glucose is released, or you have taken the energy, the blood glucose levels are high. All right. Now that gives a signaling for insulin secretion. Pancreas, they secrete the insulin. Insulin is increased. That insulin, now go to the yellow arrow. That insulin is going to do two things. One, some of it will be changing the glucose to glycogen, and some of the insulin will help that excess blood glucose to transfer into the cells. So I eat the food, my blood glucose level increases. That glucose is nothing but blood sugar level. All right. Increased blood sugar level, signal is given to pancreas. Insulin comes, it binds to that glucose and takes it into the cell. For example, I'm moving my hands now, I'm talking, my cells are using the glucose. Where is it coming from? Insulin is dragging that blood glucose inside the cells and the cells are using it up. Right? Now, what happens when there is insulin resistance or when there is insulin deficiency? If the deficiency is there, this itself is broken off, right? Insulin in right? So all of this will not happen, right? The cells will not get the energy, they will keep starving, the glucose to glycogen stores will not happen, and there is complete breakdown of the homeostasis. Second scenario is I am eating, glucose is high, pancreas is getting the signal, it is producing the insulin also, but there is some problem. Okay. Now what happens? I took the food. There is increase in the blood glucose. Pancreas has produced the insulin. Now, if you see the insulin is produced in a pretty good quantity, but it is resistant. It is not active enough. The insulin sensitivity is gone, because of which it cannot transfer that excessive glucose inside the cells. Okay. So my cells are still starving. They say, I need energy. I have the energy, I'm not putting it inside the cells. So cells are still starving. Again, a signal to the brain goes, produce more of glucose or give me quick glucose. The person craves for it, eats more calorie rich food. The sugar again increases. But is it going inside? No. So constant high blood glucose level, constant starvation, constant energy depletion inside the cells. Cells are still starving. All right. Now, what happens to that excess glucose? The body senses, okay, I have a lot of glucose still pending in the blood, might as well change it into fat cells and store it as energy reservoir. So the fat is increasing. The body fat is increasing. This is a classical example of insulin resistance. All right. Now, this is also called as crash cycle. All right. In some patients, we call it as dopamine rush. This is causing the insulin resistance. What happens? The person eats, but for reward eating or for the hedonic phase eating, what the person is doing, eating too much of calorie dense foods. The person is eating too much of sugary items or the concentrated food. The quantity is very less. Okay, but the calorie dose is too high. Now understand, quantity less, stomach is not stretching. If stomach is not stretching, it is not giving leptin secretion. There is no satiety signal. Okay, so I will have a question for all of you in the end. So what happens is calorie dense is there, extreme spike in the sugar level is there, extreme secretion of insulin is also there, but the cells are still starving. They're not getting the glucose. This is classically called as crash cycle, and this cycle continues. This is a vicious circle. Okay. Now what happens to this next? As I said, lot of glucose is there, body is converting into the fats. So there is sudden dip in the sugar, and that is called as reactive hypoglycemia. Increase in the sugar, quickly reduction in the sugar. Fat mass is still increasing and the body is still depriving of glucose. All right. And this continues. So when we have to see the clients, we must understand and analyze the case, whether it is insulin resistance. The patient is craving for sugary things again and again. Please understand, eating small frequent meals, still there is hunger. There is no satiety level. Person has the meal and again after half an hour, 1 hour, person thinks that, okay, I can eat something more. All of this is nothing but insulin resistance. Okay. I request Anvesha to avoid drawing on the screen. Anvesha, can you just clear all of these drawings made by you? So we saw the appetite regulators which induce the appetite moreover. Insulin also, in short-term insulin secretion, it will trigger more of glucose intake. Okay, and in long term it will help the homeostatic balance. You all can read more about it. Hormones are very interesting topic to learn. I just have 20 minutes, so I'm just giving you the teasers and you can just dig deeper into it. Now let us come to the second class, which are appetite suppressants, and first of it is GLP-1. GLP-1 and PYY. We are going to see what is this. GLP-1, we all know, glucagon like peptide. Okay. Yeah. So this is again secreted by small intestine, colon after the meal. Now this stimulates the insulin secretion. Now we know when the insulin is secreted, it is going to take all the blood glucose and put it inside the cell. So it will reduce the blood glucose level. It suppresses the glucagon secretion. It is similar to glucagon. The action is going to be same. What is the role of glucagon? Anybody? Let's make it interactive.
Ma'am, the participants don't have this thing to unmute themselves, but they can
Okay,
always
you have to
put
mute.
their answers in the chat box and we can work through that.
All right, then maybe I skip it because in the interest of time, I should only then speak and in the end we can make it
Yes,
interactive.
so we have an option for a Q&A session at the end,
In the end,
so we
sure,
can
works.
work towards that.
Yes, absolutely fine. So it suppresses the glucagon secretion and hence the glucose release is also reduced because glucagon is going to work on the glycogen, right? It binds to receptors in the brain to increase the satiety. Very important. GLP-1 helps the satiety. It reduces the insulin secretion, glucose is taken up, it reduces and balances the blood glucose. It empties the the stomach emptying of the food, reduces the gut motility. So slowly the food will be moving ahead. Slow glucose release in the blood, which is going to give me satiety for a longer period of time because I have a constant energy release in the blood, right? I will not have the energy dip. Now, very important. Nowadays, we all hear about Ozempic, right? Semaglutides. All of these are like uh, Ozempic given for diabetic. Wegovy is given for weight loss. Many a times the physicians are writing and the patients come to us with that. These are nothing but GLP-1 agonists. They have the similar action to GLP-1, which is going to suppress your appetite, give more of satiety, which helps the weight loss and the fat loss. Also, better sugar control because you're controlling the insulin and glucagon and glycogen levels. Another one, Manjaro injections, very well known nowadays, very well written commonly now. Now, for Manjaro, please understand there is a specific protocol to be given to the patients depending on the dosage and the injections and their courses. Throughout the number of weeks, the doctor is going to write that. Terzepatide is the known name. So, whenever in the drug chart you see these names, you should know that, okay, there is a hormonal replacement therapy kind of thing given to these patients for weight loss, and according to that your diet should be modified. So GLP-1, it is going to help me to increase the insulin so that the blood glucose level goes down, the gastric emptying slows down, and automatically my food intake is going to be lesser. The next appetite suppressant or regulator is peptide YY. This is also secreted in the ileum and the colon, the same site of secretion for both of these. The role is it is again released after eating, specifically in response to proteins and fiber. Why we say the diet should be high in protein and high in fiber? Here is the answer. We are working at the cellular level also. So while we explain it to the clients, maybe you can use more of these clinical terminologies and working at the cellular level so that they understand the importance. Otherwise, it's a generic term that have high fiber diet and have a high protein diet, right? When we explain them the base, more applicable and more connected to them. Okay. It provides early satiety, of course. So extremely important, proteins and the healthy fats and the soluble fiber, because what happens whenever there is increase in the soluble fiber, the short chain fatty acids are formed more, right? With the gut microbiota, Vaidai has also covered the gut microbiota part. When there is more of SFA, these acts as a precursor for the synthesis of these hormones. So proteins, amino acids, all these hormones, amino acids and polypeptide chains. So if my diet is good in essential, non-essential amino acid combination, if my diet is good in healthy fats, a balanced fat intake, and good amount of soluble fiber, I am going to take care of all these hormones which give more of satiety to the patients, and the patients will not have hunger pangs or not crave for particular food. Very important, cravings and menstrual cycle. Every one of us face this, I'm sure, right? Unavoidable situation. So what is it basically? Let us understand the normal physiology. Fiona, I have a request. Can we clear out all these drawings? Because my image is drawing is
But maybe what we can do is reshare your PPT once, and I also want to put in a gentle reminder for the time as well. And I would request
just
all
two
the
slides more.
participants
Yeah.
to kindly not use the annotations that is available, because that is what is creating all these lines and on the speaker slides. So please refrain from using these. Thank you so much.
All right, so coming to menstrual cycle, in this image, just understand the first phase of menstruation. Certain hormones are more active, which is FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, and estrogen levels. Okay, as you go in the luteal phase, the luteinizing hormone and the progesterone, a bit of rise in the estrogen is there. Now, progesterone is a hormone which is actually working in a way that understanding that there is a potential pregnancy chance and I have to conserve the energy. I have to conserve the body fat, because of which the person craves for more of calorie rich foods. All right. After the bleeding is there or the menstruation is there, the levels go down and the cravings will automatically go. So that's the role of progesterone, that preserve more of fat mass and preserve more of calories, hence the calorie intake increases. All right. Estrogen, in PMSing or in menopause, the estrogen levels go down, right? And that also triggers more of ghrelin secretion. This is all the normal physiology happening in every one of us, our body. And because there is decrease, the person craves for more of calories or energy intake. So PMSing, that is the luteal phase, progesterone is high, hence the person will crave for energy dense food. Menopause, here what happens is there is decrease in the estrogen, because of which ghrelin secretion is more, leptin secretion is lesser, satiety is lesser, the person will again crave for more food. Please understand, anything different from the normal physiology in the body is taken up as a physiological stress. In that, first thing body will do is conserve the energy, increase the energy stores and the reservoirs. Hence the appetite inducing factors will be more and the satiety factors will be lesser. The person will eat more. Okay. So here, as I have mentioned, during menopause, estrogens go down. There are higher levels of ghrelin, low levels of leptin, insulin resistance spikes up. The person strongly craves for food again and again. Happens in perimenopause also. Okay, it's the hormones. It's the normal physiology happening in the body. You have to find the solutions to it. Okay, rather than just going on to supplementation or injections. Progesterone, it also stimulates ghrelin. So PMS phase, you are going to crave for high carb, sugary and salty food. Find the answers which give more of satiety, more soluble fiber or electrolyte balance also, because whenever the body is in the stress, it is fight and flight mechanism. Adrenal cortex is active. The adrenal hormones are more active. So the stress hormones, cortisol will go high. In that electrolyte balance, if we try to bring in, the cravings will also be lesser. So hormonal fluctuations definitely drive the food cravings, and that's a normal physiology. Okay, there are certain physiological and other metabolic conditions which also trigger the cravings. Reactive hypoglycemia, we saw it in the insulin crash cycle or dopamine rush. Insulin resistance, PCOS, there is hormonal imbalance of the pituitary hormones and the ovarian hormones, LH, FSH, and estrogen, progesterone. That imbalance also starts giving more of cravings to the patient. Leptin resistance, we talked about it. Hypothyroidism, the thyroid hormone, free T3, T4, again inducing and affecting the pituitary, again affecting the metabolism. Thyroid is absolutely related to metabolism. So if the metabolism is slow, thyroid problem, and vice versa. It's a vicious cycle. Adrenal fatigue or stress, lot of stress, sleep apnea, less sleep, definitely it will trigger the adrenal hormones, which are again going to trigger the ghrelin move, so that hunger and the cravings will be more in the person. So just a gist of nutrition intervention, micronutrients will be covered up by the next speaker. Please do not plan low fat diet. After I read so much about hormones again, I realized one thing: low fat diet never exists, should not exist. It should be the balanced fat or the healthy fat. All our hormones are fatty acids and amino acids. So you have to give fatty acids and amino acids to the patient so that there is hormonal balance and there is metabolism balance and the cravings will be lesser. Soluble fiber, please calculate how much of soluble fiber you're giving to the patient. The hydration level, the electrolytes, are you giving them or not? We say no coconut water, no juices, no soups many a times, please be aware while you plan, because many of the cases we see in OPDs nowadays, I think 90% of them are the hormonal imbalance. There is some problem in the homeostatic phase and the hedonic phase is too high, and that's why they are having the metabolic syndrome or the syndrome X problems. So that is the base which we need to address and explain to them, so that the adherence to the diet will be more. That's all from my side, and let's see you all in the Q&A session.
Thank you so much, Swati ma'am. I think it was a very, very insightful session where you spoke about so many hormones that we practically just maybe heard about or we've never thought about it in such detail, and how exactly they will play a role. So that connections that you made with each and every hormone versus what we actually see in the OPD. So connecting the role of the specific hormone to the symptom that we see in the OPD, I think that connection was beautifully made, and that I think will make sure that we also, or all the participants, actually put in more efforts to understand this connection and then help their patients as such. Now, to bring about, to follow this up with, we come to a very clinically relevant aspect, which is hidden micronutrient deficiencies. Now, a lot of times we often see patients where persistent cravings are still there even when we try to correct the macronutrients, the lifestyle, or even the pattern of the foods or the composition of the foods that they are eating. But lot of times these cravings don't go away. Now this, I think, could be related to these hidden micronutrient deficiencies, and to explain more about, or for us to understand more about these deficiencies, whether it is magnesium or anything else, how they can manifest into different types of cravings, what are the symptoms for it, and how do we combat these cravings. I would want to call upon Miss Manisha. I'm just gonna now, Ms. Manisha Joshi is a senior ICU clinical nutritionist at the Jupiter Hospital in Thane. She's also had over 13 years of experience as a dietitian in the field of heart diseases, diabetes, and nephrology. She's also worked as the head dietitian who specializes in the diabetes care hospital, which is managed by the renowned diabetologist Dr. Sunil Gupta. She has multiple again talks and articles under her belt, and I would want to welcome Ms. Manisha and hand over the session to you. I would also want to just give a gentle reminder to try and stick to the timing, so that we also have the time to actually take the questions and answers from the participants as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Fiona.
Do you want me to share your slides?
Yeah.
Okay, is it visible?
Yeah.
Just mute
Is it
myself.
on the slideshow?
Yes.
We'll understand what is the micronutrients and hidden deficiency and cravings today. Next slide. So why nutrient deficiency may trigger cravings? So appetite is regulated by neuroendocrine and metabolic signals. So we'll see what actually happens in this. So these are the signals where the brain and hormones communicate to influence your desire to eat. So how it works, actually it senses the brain. So actually your hypothalamus and the limbic system detect energy needs or the stress. So it signals your brain, and in this, the hormones like ghrelin, that is the hunger hormone, increases appetite, while the leptin suppresses it. So it triggers the cravings. So like the stress or the lack of sleep or hormonal changes can amplify cravings through the dopamine pathway, that is the brain reward system. I hope you're able to hear me.
Yes, we can hear you. Yeah.
So example like low energy, where the ghrelin increases brain signals, like eat something where you crave high calorie, high dense foods. So in case in the stress hormones also the cortisol rises, like cravings for high comfort foods, high sugar or fat increases because the brain seeks rewards. So similarly, in the metabolic signals, which also leads to food cravings. So these come from the body's energy status, telling your brain like what nutrients you might need. So how it works? It actually works when the cells sense the nutrients level actually. So like glucose, amino acids, or the fatty acids. So if the energy is low or on a certain nutrient is deficient, the body sends metabolic signals to drive cravings. So like when you see the targeted cravings may appear, like if you are low on glucose, you crave more for sweets. So if you are low on protein, you crave more for like meats or nuts. So for example, you are skipping your breakfast, the blood sugar drops, the metabolic signals to the brain that like to crave on more of sweet or carb rich foods for quick energy. So basically, the neuroendocrine and the metabolic signals work together to produce signals, to produce cravings. So the deficiencies may alter the neurotransmitter synthesis, hormonal signaling, and the cellular energy status, which is already discussed in a few slides. Next. So the true cravings versus the behavioral craving. The psychological cravings are driven by metabolic needs, whereas the behavioral driven by reward or emotions. Some The psychological are persistent, while the behavioral episodic. Like if you are in stress, so or if you are deprived of sleep, uh, in the psychological, you may correlate with symptoms, that is the construct triggered in the behavioral. Partial relief after intake, uh, and in the behavioral, often unsatisfied because it is more of behavior. Next slide. So deficiency specific mechanisms, you can see in magnesium deficiency and chocolate cravings. So magnesium is involved in more of this serotonin synthesis, which helps in the mood regulation. So which helps in the neuromuscular relaxation. So the deficiency leads to stress, irritability. So which leads to craving of magnesium rich foods like more of like chocolates or cakes or pastries. So food sources, more of nuts, seeds, dark chocolates, and green leafy vegetables. Next slide. Sodium deficiency, which triggers the salt cravings, which are associated with chips, pickles, namkeen. Mechanism like sodium regulates fluid balance and blood pressure. So loss via sweat, diarrhea, dialysis, which activates the RAS system, that is renin-angiotensin aldosterone system, which is already discussed by Vedi ma'am. So I will not go deep into that. Salt appetite, which also increases. So food sources are salted chips, buttermilk, soups, cottage cheese. Next slide. Chromium deficiency leads to sugar cravings, associated cravings like sugary foods or refined carbs. The mechanism is chromium enhances insulin sensitivity. So deficiency leads to the impaired glucose uptake, which leads to rapid glucose fluctuation or the cravings. So food sources is whole grains, broccoli, nuts, and legumes. Next slide. So iron deficiency is unusual cravings, mostly associated with non-food items, that is ice, that is phagophagia or the clay. The mechanism is altered dopamine pathway and the oxygen delivery. So brain 6 stimulation and unusual ingestion behaviors, what we have recently seen, the many people have habit or craving of eating hair or papers, which is seen in iron deficiencies. Food sources, green leafy vegetables, lentils, red meat, uh, and just to help in the symptoms, iron and vitamin C combination helps absorption and improve it. Next slide. So protein deficiency, associated cravings like refined carbs, frequent snacking. Mechanism is protein regulates satiety hormones, that is GLP-1 and peptide fiber, which was already discussed by Swati ma'am, so we won't go deep into that. Low protein uh, shows more of poor satiety, which leads to more of hunger pangs and leads to carb seeking. So food sources like milk, eggs, dal, pulses, legumes, soya products. Next slide. Essential fatty acids deficiency or either fat or carb cravings. Mechanism, chromium enhances insulin receptor activity. So deficiency leads to the decreased insulin efficiency or impaired cellular glucose uptake, which results in fluctuating the blood glucose and reactive hypoglycemia like states, like which triggers the rapid carbohydrate cravings, like more of carbs, more of sugars, chocolates. So the clinical relevance can be that is pre-diabetic insulin resistance or the high refined carb diets. Next slide. So how to assess that? We can do it with the clinical assessment and the management. Identifying deficiency driven cravings like persistent or repetitive cravings, associated symptoms like fatigue, muscle cramps is there, lethargy is there. So we can take a detailed diet history of 24 hours. A biochemical test like HB, ferritin, electrolytes, glucose can be repeated and can be reported along with the clinical signs and the symptoms. Next slide. So the correction approach is the first food strategy. Target supplementation if needed and address the underlying causes, that is malabsorption, chronic illnesses like dialysis or diabetes, nutritional assessment like BMI, MUAC, weight loss. These can be assessed. Biochemical, what I said, hemoglobin, serum albumin test, which can be done. Assessments, SGA, and can be done. Screening tool must NRS or MNA can be done, and the functional assessment, that is hand grip and physical performance test. Next slide. So clinical take home message, like not all cravings are behavioral, some are biological signs of deficiency as well. So identifying patterns, like you can improve more on diet compliance, reduce unhealthy snacking, and enable targeted nutrition therapy. Yeah. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I think a lot of times when we just dismiss our patients' cravings, thinking that their compliance is poor and they are not following the diet that we've given, a lot of times we don't take into account their blood parameters or the micronutrients specifically, because when we plan our diet, we look at the macronutrients. We make sure we are giving them a high protein, high calorie, or as per whatever the requirements are. But a lot of times we forget, or we don't keep in mind that micronutrients also play a very big role, and even after correcting their diets or making sure that we are putting them on a correct regimen, the cravings don't go away. So I think this makes us realize that we should look deeper into the parameters, the blood parameters, the micronutrients specifically, to decode whether there is any kind of requirements or corrections that need to be done, which can help the cravings as well. So thank you so much, ma'am, for that. Finally, when we come to broaden our lens, which is beyond the physiology, I would want to invite Mrinali. Now, cravings are usually, shaped by stress, sleep, the circadian rhythm that you are following, and also environmental factors. Now, when we all this while we've been talking about the physiology, the parameters, the blood parameters, but a lot of times we also forget that there are environmental factors also that are going to play a role, psychological and environmental factors as well, that are going to play a role in the cravings that are there. So to tie all of these aspects together, I would want to invite Pranali to discuss the psychological and environmental dimensions of cravings. Just a short introduction for her. In just a second.
Also, Fiona, I'm not able to share my screen. It says the host is not allowing sharing for this meeting. So can you
Uh,
correct that as well?
just give me a minute. I think I've made you the co-host. Just give me a minute. Let me just. Yeah. So to invite Mrinali is the chief dietitian at the Apex Group of Hospitals. She's also the lead nutritionist for the Heart Health India Foundation. She has been a guest lecturer and trainer for multiple degree and certificate courses as well. She specializes in critical care nutrition, cardiac nutrition, metabolic diseases, and diabetes management. She has some publications, research publications under her name. She's also spoken at several national and regional forums, and she's been a fellow with the FSSAI Eat Right campaign, safe and nutritious food at different schools. I would want to welcome Renali and want to hand over the session to you. I think you've joined with two devices, and I will make the other device as well as the co-host.
Yeah, because when we tried sharing screen at the start of the session, we were able to do it from the same
Now I
device.
will do it.
I'll just try. Yeah, I can now.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, I hope my screen is visible. And beginning with the topic that has been given to me, psychological and environmental drivers of food cravings. So, good evening, one and all. In my session, we would be speaking about cravings and the factors that affect cravings apart from normal physiology, hunger, and things whatnot, which we experience, but some things that we often ignore. So, we have already understood that cravings are often interpreted as a simple lack of willpower, and many patients come into clinics saying, I know what I should eat, but I just cannot control my cravings. However, cravings are rarely just about discipline, and they are a result of a very complex interaction between brain chemistry, hormones, emotional states, and the environment as a whole that we live in. So, in this talk, I will be focusing on the psychological and environmental drivers of cravings and how these factors influence metabolic and hormonal pathways that regulate appetite. Because understanding these drivers is important. Addressing them can significantly improve diet adherence and long-term metabolic outcomes. So to start with, food cravings are rarely a single factor. Rather, to say they are multifactorial. These usually emerge from the interaction of multiple systems. Like firstly, we have the brain reward pathways, particularly dopamine circuits that respond to pleasurable foods. Secondly, hormonal regulators such as cortisol, ghrelin, and leptin, which influence hunger and satiety signals. Thirdly, the psychological triggers such as stress, emotional distress, or boredom that can stimulate the urge to eat. And fourthly, environmental exposure plays a major role. The modern food environment constantly presents us with highly palatable foods. And finally, lifestyle patterns, including sleep quality, screen exposure, and irregular meal timings, which significantly affect the craving behaviors. So, cravings should be viewed as a biopsychosocial phenomenon, if I had to club it all together, and not simply a nutritional issue, because cravings are not a failure of discipline, and rather they are a reflection of an underlying physiology. To start with, we cannot forget but mention emotional eating. If we're talking about cravings, where one of the most common behavioral drivers, rather for every behavior or for every reaction, and as well for cravings, is emotional eating. This occurs when individuals consume food in response to emotional states rather than their physiological hunger. Common emotional triggers include stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, or even the desire to reward oneself after a long day. The reason emotional eating occurs is linked to brain reward mechanisms. where highly palatable foods, especially those rich in sugar and fat, stimulate the release of dopamine and serotonin, which are the feel-good hormones. These neurotransmitters temporarily improve mood and thus create a sense of comfort. However, this relief can be very short-lived, and over time, the brain begins to associate certain foods with emotional relief, rather reinforcing the behavior and creating a cycle of conditional craving. So, clinically, emotional hunger tends to be sudden, specific, and urgent, often craving particular foods than just general nourishment or general hunger. With this, if I were to ask you a question that how many of you have patients who say, I eat well all day, but lose control at night, or I have late night cravings? So that pattern alone already tells us that this is not just about food, it's about the circadian rhythm or stress or the habit loops. And that is what exactly we will be seeing in the further slides, where it would be correct to say that the brain is always trying to solve a problem and cravings are often its solution to stress, fatigue, or emotional discomfort. To begin with, talking about stress and our craving behaviors, stress is another major driver of cravings because when the body experiences stress, it activates the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis in our brains, leading to increased production of stress hormone we all know is cortisol. So elevated cortisol levels increases appetite and alter food preferences. Individuals under chronic stress may tend to crave foods that are high in sugar, fat, and refined carbs. From an evolutionary perspective as well, the brain interprets stress as a signal of potential threat or energy demand. As a result, it promotes the intake of quick and energy dense foods. So cortisol also interacts with dopamine pathways, the feel good hormones, making comfort foods even more rewarding. This explains why many patients report stress induced snacking, particularly during the evening or late night hours. This has also shown in studies by Adam and Epel demonstrating that chronic stress elevates cortisol levels, which in turn increases preference of energy-dense comfort foods itself. Next, very important subtopic can be sleep deprivation and appetite hormones, where sleep plays a critical role in appetite regulation. We all know, and sleep deprivation disrupts two key hormones involved in hunger control, which are ghrelin and leptin. Ghrelin, which stimulates hunger, increases when sleep is inadequate, whereas leptin, which is the counter hormone which signals satiety, decreases. This hormonal imbalance itself results in increased hunger and reduced satisfaction after meals. So, additionally, when you are experiencing sleep deprivation, it enhances the activity of the brain's reward centers when individuals are exposed to food cues. This means that after a night of poor sleep, individuals are more likely to crave high calorie, carbohydrate rich foods, and they tend to consume larger portions. A classic work by Spiegel and his colleagues showed that even short-term sleep deprivation significantly increased ghrelin and reduced leptin, and therefore driving increased hunger and carbohydrate cravings. Talking about sleep, we cannot miss the circadian rhythm, which our bodies operate on a biological clock known as the circadian rhythm. And this internal clock regulates several metabolic processes, which includes everything like appetite, hormones, insulin sensitivity, and energy metabolism. So, when circadian rhythms are disrupted, such as through late night eating, irregular meal timings, or shift working in shifts, metabolic regulation becomes impaired. So, research shows that consuming meals late at night can lead to poorer glucose control and increased hunger signals the following day that we already saw. And the body is metabolically optimized to consume food during the daylight hours rather than the night hours. So, when eating patterns extend into the late night, it can strengthen craving cycles and increase metabolic risk. Um, Circadian research has already shown the same thing that the late eating patterns are linked with poorer metabolic outcomes and increased appetite dysregulation. What are all of these? All of these that we just talked about were environmental cues. And then this makes way to another powerful driver of cravings, which is the modern food environment. We are constantly exposed to food cues which are through advertisements, social media, restaurant banners, and packaged foods that are easily accessible on our fingertips through our phones. These cues activate learned associations in our brain. For example, seeing or smelling a particular food can stimulate appetite even if physiological hunger is absent at the moment, even if you're feeling full at the moment. This is because many ultra processed foods are designed to combine sugar, fat, and salt in such a way that creating what researchers call hyper palatable foods. These foods strongly activate dopamine pathways. They are rather designed to activate dopamine pathways, making them difficult to resist and encouraging repeated consumption. So it's not just our fault, but it is also the manufacturers have picked up on the cue already and then using it to their benefit to make us consume them in larger quantities. Same is shown in a controlled trial by Hall and colleagues showed that ultra-processed diets significantly increased calorie intake even when they were matched for micronutrients intake. So, having heard all of that, we can now confidently say that if we don't address sleep, stress, and environment, we are treating cravings only at the surface. And having said that, we cannot forget but to mention our habits. So, we all know that over time, repeated behaviors become habit loops. What does a typical loop look like? Looks like it includes three components, which is a cue, a routine, and a reward. So, for example, an evening cup of tea may automatically trigger the habit of eating biscuits or some other fried snacks. Similarly, watching television may become associated with snacking, like popcorn. So eventually, the cue itself is enough to trigger a craving. So the brain begins anticipating the dopamine reward associated with certain foods. This process is essentially known as conditioned eating, where food consumption becomes automatic rather than a conscious behavior. A research by Worko highlighted that hyperpalatable foods activate the same dopamine reward pathways as addictive substances. And this is how explaining why cravings can feel so difficult to control. So hyperpalatable foods have the same effect as addictive substances, and thus they're very difficult to get rid of. They are adaptive in our habits faster than usual. Talking about lifestyle and habits, we cannot forget to mention our digital lifestyle and our digitally dependent habits, where digital lifestyle have also changed the way throughout that we interact with food. These days, eating while watching television or scrolling through phones is often leading to mindless eating. So, when attention is diverted, individuals become less aware of satiety signals and tend to consume more calories. Research has already suggested that people may consume 15 to 25% more food when eating while they're distracted. So, additionally, late night screen exposure suppresses melatonin production, disrupting the sleep patterns and thus indirectly again increasing the craving behavior the next day. Knowing that habits can be dangerous, we are falling into loops, it is very crucial to understand how we need to break this craving cycle. So, managing cravings requires addressing both behavioral and biological factors, all of those that we studied so far. Establishing regular meal pattern or meal timings can help stabilize blood glucose levels physiologically and thus preventing extreme hungers. Next is improving sleep hygiene helps restore hormonal balance, which is between ghrelin and leptin. Next is stress management techniques such as breathing exercises, mindfulness, and physical activity can reduce cortisol levels. Encouraging mindful eating helps patients differentiate between emotional hunger and physiological hunger. So, nutritionally, diets which are rich in protein and fiber may improve satiety and thus reduce cravings. And finally, modifying the whole food environment, for example, limiting easy access to triggered foods can be very effective. We most often then always have patients asking us if cravings were purely about hunger, why do they usually occur for foods such as sweets or snacks only, rather than our regular dal, roti, or vegetables? And now we have the answer that because cravings are driven by reward pathways and learned behavior, They're not just about energy needs anymore. How are we supposed to use all of this knowledge in our clinical setup? And this is exactly why counseling patients with cravings is very important. We need to assess in clinical practice, it is very important to evaluate cravings in a broader context. Instead of only focusing on diet plans, clinician should assess several other lifestyle factors as well. These may include sleep patterns, stress levels, emotional triggers, meal timings, and the patient's food environment. So, simple counseling questions such as when do your cravings usually occur, or what were you feeling before you started eating, can reveal a lot of valuable insights. So, combining nutritional therapy with behavioral strategies can significantly improve long term adherence and metabolic outcomes. Having said so, I felt like sharing a case study would be really interesting. And thus, this case study, which I have given the title saying it's not just lack of willpower, which was a case of a 34-year-old working female who presented with a repeated failure to follow her diet plans. Her primary complaint was, I can eat well all day, but I lose control at the night. So findings were that she used to sleep 5 to 6 hours. Of course, she had a high stress work life and used to skip meals during the day and used to have intense cravings at 10, 11 p.m. when usually she used to get free from her work. And then she frequently fell into patterns where she caught herself ordering desserts. To interpret this, at first glance, this appears like a poor dietary discipline, maybe. But when we analyze deeper, multiple drivers may emerge. So, to break it down, sleep deprivation already is increasing ghrelin and reducing leptin. The chronic stress that she's exposed to is increasing the cortisol levels, which can be linked to her sugar cravings. Skipping of meals is causing glucose dips for her, and thus the rebound hunger she's experiencing. Also, nighttime environment where she's in her comfort zone is now giving her cues for conditioned eating. What can be a good intervention? So, structuring meals for her, which demands her for not skipping meals. Also, sleep correction, targeting at more than 5 to 6 hours, that is about 7 to 8 hours of sleep now. Of course, stress management routine and replacing the night dessert habit with a planned alternative, which is also nutritionally going well with her. What can be the outcome? Within 3 to 4 weeks, we saw that her cravings reduced significantly, and all of this happened without even putting her on a very extreme dietary restriction. What does all of this tell us? To summarize a little bit, to conclude, food cravings are not simply a matter of willpower, like we have all discussed about it. They arise from complex interactions between hormones, brain reward systems, emotional states, lifestyle patterns, and environmental exposures as well. For us clinicians, understanding this multidimensional nature of cravings is very essential. So, when we address the biological, psychological, and environmental factors together, we can help patients manage cravings more effectively and improve dietary adherence as a whole. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Mrinali. I think it was a very well explained and very detailed session as well. So it gave us a lot of understanding on the different factors that are going to play a role apart from the diet that you're giving. Now, we've explored cravings from multiple angles, from the physiological, neurological, practical, everything. But now comes the most important question is, what do we do with all of this information in practice? To translate this basically into an actionable strategy, I would want to call back Bhakti ma'am to give her insights and give uh, her I don't know what to say. I mean, she's been in the practice for so long. From what we do in theory versus what we actually do practically, or how do we actually put all of this into practice? I think she would be one of the best people to give us this information. So I would want to call back Bhakti ma'am, and I would request everybody keep your pens or your notes handy, because this practically will be a cheat code for you all, or a very simple takeaway segment for y'all, which summarizes everything that we've been doing for the past 2 hours.
Okay, thank you. Let me quickly share my slides. Okay. So firstly, okay. So I hope my slides are visible, Fiona.
Yes, ma'am. If you could just, yeah, perfect. Now there.
Yeah, so a lot of information. Yes, I've been getting a lot of feedback from the group that a lot of information, but yeah, it was necessary. We can't take up a topic and then leave it halfway. So we had to cover all aspects of the topic that we covered. But with so much of information, how do you simplify? How do you use this information in your practice? How do you use this information as a prescription for your patient? And which in turn can help you. So first and foremost, very very important, we all understood the physiology. We all understood there's a hormonal play, there is a play which is happening in your gut, in your brain, in your hormones. So while taking history, while doing your assessment, you have to now try to map these problems with a certain definitive direction. So very important, while taking a history, a dietary history, you need to ask your patient what time is the craving. Is the time of the craving early in the morning or in the afternoon, or is it late night or an afternoon slump? What type of cravings they have, whether it's a sweet or a salty or a crunchy or a fatty, because you just saw in the slides that each of these are associated with a different pathway and with a different type of craving, and what is the frequency that they face, because this will help you to understand the pattern. And once you understand the pattern, you will be able to identify what is the underlying driver or the underlying causative factor for this particular type of craving. So first and foremost, what do? We saw a lot of it was associated to our hormones, through our gut hormones, to our appetite hormones, to leptin. So we see a lot of glucose variability, and a lot of time, a lot of these cravings go about by a dip in sugar, because of which there is a craving, and then you end up eating a lot of sweet foods. So first, you should try and stabilize the blood glucose. That is very, very important. And how do you do that? You have to make sure that your diet prescription that you are giving to the patient, each and every meal consists of proteins, at least 15 to 25 grams of protein, depending on whether it's a 4 or 5 meal pattern and the requirement of the patient, and hence the variation. You'll see a lot of times people tend to eat a particular meal which is loaded with protein, a particular meal which is maybe loaded only with carbohydrate or sugar. So there is a dip in the protein, and that's where you will see a dip in the energy levels, or the afternoon slump, or an increase in your cravings. So it's very very important that whether your calorie, proteins that you are giving, there is an even distribution amongst the meal. Adding fiber and fat, both are very important. You heard Swati talk about that fats are very very important. Good fats are very very important in the diet, so you need not go for a very fat restricted or a complete restriction of fat. You need to stabilize the glucose spikes by adding fiber source in your meal, along with protein and the fat source as well. Stabilize glucose, avoid fasting gaps, especially for patients who are insulin resistant. In these patients, you make sure that you don't give them a fasting period of more than 4 hours. So most of my prescriptions, I don't give a 2 hourly plan. I would say at least a 3 hourly plan, because that's more practical. And so reducing the gap between the meals, not going beyond 4 hours of gap between any meal, whether it's breakfast, mid-morning, lunch, whatever. So all of these strategies, these are the strategies which will help to stabilize the sugars, which will help to actually provide calories evenly throughout the day, which is what is eventually going to help you to reduce your cravings. And you need to replace smartly. You can't eliminate food groups, you can't eliminate foods. So don't remove things. So instead of telling the patient stop sugar, you try and swap the sugar sources. So pair your carbs with protein and fat. Always going for a low GI swap over a high GI product in the diet, and allow for structured indulgence. This is very very important, where you give maybe a frequency, or you give a capping on the amount that they can eat, but don't say no. or a complete no. I think that is a strategy which can really help. Like you tell the patient, okay, once in 10 days, this is the portion of maybe a dessert that is allowed for you. So they know that, okay, once in 10 days we can indulge. So giving them a timeline, a structured way of indulgence. Also, you have to tell them that, okay, indulge only in one thing at a time. Don't try and indulge in, like if you felt like having a dessert, but you started with a pizza, then a burger and a pasta, and a cold drink, and then ended with a dessert. So don't do that. So because restriction is where people will go into that rebound dopamine drive. So it is important that you don't go or use the word restriction. Instead, give them swaps. Neurotransmitter targeting. We talked about so much of neuroendocrine, transmission and hormone transmission and hormone imbalance and hormonal roles. So now try and club these cravings and what exactly these cravings are causing and what you need to do. Like if there is a sugar craving, then that sugar craving is also going to lead to a low serotonin level. So which is why you need to then make sure that if this is what is happening in the patient, then I need to give tryptophan foods. I need to, adjust the carbs throughout the day in a very systematic manner. If there are chocolate cravings, it can be maybe because of magnesium deficiency. Then I think this was very nicely covered by Manisha in her slides, where when you know the type of craving that is there, you then try and complement your diet with the food source of that particular, like if it's a magnesium deficiency, then you make sure that there are good amount of nuts, seeds, maybe some amount of even a plain cocoa or a dark chocolate, added in the patient's meal. When there is a craving for crunchy food, now understand we were all this while talking about different food groups, but there can also be a craving which is associated with the type or the mouthfeel of the food, where you don't feel like eating the regular food, you want something crunchy, crispy. So this is possibly more of a stress relief driver, where you want something crunchy because you want to release of stress. So here you can have different textured alternatives which you can incorporate in the diet. And yes, we understood about the salt cravings. It can be maybe due to an adrenal stress. So here correcting the electrolytes will also make a difference. Not just about elimination of these high processed foods, but to correct the electrolyte imbalance. So look into that aspect as well, because this is where your hydration part will also come in. I was just glancing through the questions where I saw one of the questions on hydration. Yes, so when there is a salt craving, when you want to correct electrolytes, you also need to take care of the hydration status of the patient. Sleep is a medicine. So I think from all of this, one thing comes out very, very clearly, that it's not the food, it's not the hormones alone, but it is the sleep. It starts from there, right? We saw Mrinali explained it very well, that it all starts with a sleep imbalance, because the sleep is going to have an impact on your hormones, and these hormones are going to have an impact on your cravings. So if you have a sleep deprived patient, someone who is deprived of sleep, you will see a higher ghrelin and a lower leptin, and that itself is going to increase your craving almost 30 to 50%, which is way too high. So to fix the sleep before you fix the diet. So in my prescription, I make sure first to start asking them, before I start asking them about their food, I ask them what time they sleep, what time they wake up. So before I even start talking about the food, I first look at what is their sleep pattern, whether they are sleeping 6 to 8 hours or not. And you correct that timing, which is very important. Respect female physiology. Very, very important. Women go through a different physiology all through, different phases the entire month. Okay. So with each phase, there is going to be a variability. So definitely in a luteal phase, you will see where the cravings are going a little high. There can be also insulin sensitivity or reduced insulin sensitivity that time. So here at this time, where you know there is already reduced insulin sensitivity and there is increased cravings, if you cut off carbs completely, they are going to go crazy. Okay, you can't control that, and that's the time where they will always end up eating a lot of sugary foods. So this is not the phase where you restrict carbohydrates, or rather you adjust the diet in a way where you give a little easy hand over the complex carbohydrate, or give them a little higher intake of carbs during this time. Yes, you can support with magnesium B6 in the diet if you are suspecting a deficiency or a symptom associated to that. And stress, we all know, I mean, with all these things, stress plays a very important role. It is one of the silent drivers, because this stress, no matter whatever it is, it's an environmental stress or emotional stress, it's going to impact your cortisol, which is what is your stress hormone. And increase in cortisol itself is going to increase your sugar cravings, emotional eating patterns, and this in turn will increase the fat storage. So there is no simple way than trying to fix your meal times. So you have fixed meal times, reduce the intake of caffeine in the diet, or rather, if not able to reduce or eliminate completely, at least not in the later half of the day, try and give them more during their alert hours. Add calming nutrients in the diet like magnesium, omega 3. This can actually play a very important role. So antioxidants will play a very important role to try to reduce this oxidative stress in the body. Identify the hidden deficiencies. We heard about the deficiencies. We heard about iron deficiency, which can lead to fatigue. That can again lead to sugar craving also. It leads to cravings for unusual foods, right? But it will also going to eventually impact your sugars. Magnesium deficiency, where you suddenly start craving for chocolates. B complex deficiencies, you will find that the person is most of the time low on energy, always is seeking for sugar or carb, foods in the diet. So to identify these things are very important, and wherever possible, do the blood test and know the exact deficiency range so that you can correct them, rather than trying to just do firefighting without really looking at the actual numbers. And avoid over restriction in the cycle. So don't get into this mode of over restriction, especially when you know someone is unable to, cope up with so much of restriction. Because crash diet, extreme diet, very low carb diet, or a very high protein diet, which is very, very low in carb, you are going to see an imbalance in your ghrelin as well as your leptin. And this in turn is eventually going to put the patient in the binge cycle. So a sustainable diet will definitely help you to control your cravings, and a restrictive one is actually going to create further more cravings. So what we are looking at, and here obviously personalization is going to win. We did have Manisha talking about nutrition assessment, where she spoke about doing a structured assessment for the patient. So to take the clinical history, look at the lab reports, look at the hormonal status, look at the lifestyle, bridge all these dots together so that you know what exactly is driving these cravings, because all cravings are not going to be because of the same cause, right? So cravings are not enemies, right? I said this before also. They are feedback, and the better we interpret them, the better we treat our patients. So thank you so much. I hope it was a fruitful session and you all had some good takeaways to take back home. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I think it was wonderfully just put together where you explained, summarized everything that we've been doing for the past 2 hours. I think now we can take up a few questions from the audience that we have. We'll quickly just maybe in 5 minutes or so just look at the questions. And then I would also want to invite Dr. Prashant Salvi. He is the president of our IPEN Mumbai chapter. Sir, if you're here, please, I would request you also to put in your suggestions and put in your inputs for the questions as well. So we have a question, is HRT, so hormone replacement therapy, suitable for some patients who have been struggling in menopause phase, if along with the MNT? So I think Vaidehi ma'am can take up this question, I think if she's still here.
Just check if she's there, because she had a meeting to attend. So she had told me
She's there.
Oh,
Ma'am,
she's
you are on mute, so if you could just
there.
unmute yourself. You're not able to.
You're muted. You
Yes.
just
Done.
huh.
Done.
So,
Yeah.
ma'am, I am not sure if you heard the question.
Yeah, please repeat.
Is HRT, hormone replacement therapy, suitable for some patients who have been struggling in menopause phase if along with MNT?
So again, it depends on the complexity. That is what I feel. So if at all, after doing all types of interventions, if we are not able to give the right solution, in that case, where it is not manageable with the help of the lifestyle modification, then that is something the call will have to be taken by the physician or the gynec. But that is what I can say. But not for all. Not for all, for sure.
Not for everybody. Okay. We have next question. Maybe Swati ma'am can take this. What about bioidentical hormones? Have you seen any patients in your OPD who have taken these bioidentical hormones and have helped them in cravings or other issues in menopause and perimenopause? Swati ma'am still here? If not, maybe Manisha ma'am, can you take that up?
Uh, yeah, can you repeat the question?
What about bioidentical hormones? Have you seen any patients in your OPD who have taken these bioidentical hormones and have helped them in cravings or other issues in menopause or perimenopause?
No, I didn't had these patients actually
Okay.
in
Bhakti ma'am,
Just a moment. Swati is there, I guess. Hi,
Yeah,
unmuted.
now I'm unmuted.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
So,
yes.
rather than the conventional hormonal therapies, bioidentical hormonal therapies are better because they say the molecular structure is more close to the natural hormones, right? And that is why many a times they are prescribed to the people who are in perimenopause, menopause, even in PMSing. But I think as dietitians, we must identify what is the root cause for that hormonal imbalance, whether it is nutrient deficiency, whether it is stress or sleep, and then address that. Because in long term, this is going to help, not the HRT all the time. So, yes, for a brief period of time where the symptoms or the health issues are very severe, the therapies can help us for a short period of time. But in long term, of course, we need to address the root cause.
okay. I hope that is clear. I think Bhakti ma'am, you can take up this next question. What about HSCRP and homocysteine tests? Usually they are not done by the doctors. What is your take on those tests to be done, whether whenever you do a blood test?
So these are inflammatory markers. So CRP or homocysteine, so that basically just tells you about the inflammation status in the body. So yes, they are not routinely done, but you will find any person who has any kind of a metabolic imbalance, the levels will be raised. So if it is not increased, so basically any level of increase means there is an inflammation. But a significant level, like when you know there is a cardiac issue or a cardiometabolic issue, you will find that the levels increase almost 1,000 times. So that is at that point of time, it is more like a prognostic markers, but in a routine basis, it is only telling us whether there is any inflammation or not. And you can't see a CRP or a homocysteine in an isolation. There's definitely going to be a complete, panel done along with it to really correlate why those CRPs are high. So just for a routine purpose, you will not do it. If you're suspecting some kind of a metabolic disorders, yes, definitely you'll look at that. But simply if you have done a CBC and CRP and you see that the CRP levels are high, it shows that there is inflammation, but then you look at the other metabolic parameters as well.
Okay. Manisha ma'am, I think you can take this one. Are essential fatty acid cravings common and how can we diagnose them?
uh, essential fatty acids are very much common, and like to curb it, you can go for flax seeds. Uh, you can go for omega 3 fatty acids intake. We can improve on that basically. So like 1 or 2 teaspoon of flax seeds every day should help.
So, just to add on to
Yeah.
what Manisha just said, uh, omega-3 fatty acid, sadly, there is no clear-cut diagnosis or clear-cut test which tells you. But I remember there is a panel I think there was a laboratory somewhere based in Delhi. In fact, they had developed this panel where they actually check your omega-3 or your fatty acid status in the body. So I will, I think, take this up and check again whether they are still in, they are doing this practice or not, because this was some few years ago, where through a sample of your saliva, they actually find out. No, was it saliva or blood test? Now I'm not sure, but there was a kit that they give, and with that kit they can actually assess your full fatty acid profile. They see what your omega-3s are, what your mufa pufa levels in the body, and based on that they give you a prediction of your cardiometabolic risk. So that is available. But yeah, I will check. Fiona, just keep a note of this before I forget. So I will check with them if that's available. I'll post it on the group for everybody. And there was just one thing. I'll just take this question because I can just see it. Someone has mentioned about a question which says, will you call it craving when a person is irritable and unhappy and not at peace most of the times, 90% of the times, and only finds happiness in junk food or just the rice, and also sleeps in the afternoon? So, first and foremost, this typically doesn't look like only a craving issue. Okay, there is a psychological aspect here, so a little more of assessment is needed here. You will not just stop at doing a nutritional assessment for this patient, you will do a psychological assessment as well. It can be maybe associated to depression. So here a routine care program will not help. Maybe in your care you will have to incorporate a psychologist also to try and understand whether there is some hidden depression or some other kind of issue associated, and it's not just purely just the craving part. Yeah, Fiona, you can take
Thank you, ma'am. I think Pranali, you can take up this next question. What about intermittent fasting? Then, in terms of cravings, I think there is a lot of rage going on about intermittent fasting, and I think what does it exactly mean for cravings? Pranali, if you could just help us with that.
I don't think she's
I
around.
can see
You are.
her. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, so intermittent fasting can have both beneficial and adverse effects on cravings, rather depending on the individual's metabolic state, stress levels, and lifestyle patterns. So, the potential benefits in some individuals, especially those with structured routines, intermittent fasting can actually reduce cravings. Why this is because fewer eating windows and fewer decision points here. You are fixated on some eating windows and some fasting windows, so here the decision making process is reduced. Also, improved insulin sensitivity has been seen or associated with intermittent fasting. So more stable blood glucose again is helpful in controlling the cravings. Also, reduced mindless snacking, where in the busy periods or you are avoiding eating because that is your fasting window. So many patients report that once they adapt uh, their hunger becomes more predictable and cravings have been reduced now. Also, the potential downsides can be, however, in other individuals, especially those with high stress or poor sleep, intermittent fasting can actually increase cravings. Okay, so why this? Because prolonged fasting is now, ghrelin is peaking for them. Also, they already have high cortisol levels. So, especially in stressed individuals, this leads to intense hunger and rebound eating then. So, they fall into this trap altogether. So, this is when we see patients losing control during the eating window and often craving high sugar or high fat foods itself. The link between all of this is that from a psychological and behavior point of view, intermittent fasting can sometimes reinforce a restrict, crave and overeat cycle if not implemented correctly, especially in emotional eaters, where high stress professionals and poor sleep patterns are seen, and women with hormonal insensitivity are also seen. Okay, so in a clinical way, the key takeaway from this can be intermittent fasting is not inherently good or bad for cravings. It is highly context dependent, rather, and the underlying drivers like stress, sleep deprivation, and emotional eating are, if they are not addressed, that fasting period may worsen cravings rather than improve them. So, intermittent fasting can reduce cravings in a regulated system, but they can amplify cravings in if the system is a
dysregulated one. In fact, in my practice, I assess whether a patient has stable meal patterns, a good sleep, and low stress before even recommending a fasting to them. Otherwise, I would always prioritize behavioral regulation first. So, we have already seen that there is so much emerging evidence suggesting that early time restricted feeding is aligned with better circadian rhythms and then thus may reduce cravings compared to the late night eating windows anyway.
Okay. Thank you. I think there are a lot of questions about specific supplementations or what type of iron or magnesium or B12 or which. So brand specifications I don't think we'll be doing, but depending on the requirement of the patient is the levels at which they are. I think that is how you will be prescribing the dosages that are there. So the salts of which the micronutrients are will play a more role, better role or bigger role rather than the brand specific ones. So I think that is together another session that we can have on. So I will not be going into those questions where there is specifications of the supplements that are to be given.
Just think, also, I see a lot of questions where they have directly put in a case or rather just mentioned that, okay, this is a unique kind of craving, or if someone has certain cravings after a high, meal, dinner. But again, just looking at that one or two lines, you cannot really identify. We had four speakers who had to go overboard over time to actually make the concepts clear. So you have to understand it is not just कि अच्छा ये है तो फिर यही होगा. Assumption कर सकते हैं, but you still need to dig in further. So I think these questions which you have asked needs a little more digging, little more trying to understand, what exactly is the other factors associated. So I think we won't be able to take those questions. Yeah,
I think
space.
more or less these are case basis. Another thing which is interesting is can you throw some light upon soya proteins and hormones, especially in teens and menopause age women?
So I think we are talking about cravings. So when we are talking in the topic of cravings, it's not related. When you're talking with the topic of hormones, they are not contraindicated because soya proteins, there are multiple studies which have shown that in menopausal age, it can actually help. In fact, even in young females, or teenage also, it has shown beneficial effects, especially for maybe PCOS and in these cases. So, I mean, it's not connected to the topic directly, so I think we'll not take that question. But yeah, they're not contraindicated. And
Okay, I think we have covered most of the questions that are. Okay, yeah, this is coming. Ma'am, can you give examples for crunchy or crispy snacks, healthy options?
we
Because
always
texture is something that you spoke about.
So crunchy or crispy, we always think about wafers and chips, right? So here you will have to maybe modify and give them options of crunchy snacking, which can be in lines of say maybe khakras or healthy toast, which are maybe homemade crackers or seed crackers. So basically a difference in texture, which gives them the feeling of eating something crunchy rather than eating soft and mushy foods most of the time. So textured food is what dehydrated fruits and veggies. I mean, there are a lot of products like that also, but you need to be a little careful on the sodium content in those, because I have come across some of those brands where there is a lot of salt in it. So one needs to look at that a little this thing. Yeah, I think it's time when we can call Dr. Prashant. Yeah, because
So,
I think we've got a little bored over time, but yeah, we are not
yes.
complaining. Yeah, roasted
Yeah,
makhanas, yes, those are also. Yes, please.
I was here only. I was listening to all the expert comments. Very well conducted by Fiona. And today everybody understood that cravings are not just to blame patients for. There is a lot of science behind those cravings. And what beautifully these all speakers have done justice to the natural chemistry and the biochemistry, the metabolic parameters. So that really makes a lot of difference. So probably now onward, we will not just blame the patient that you have cravings and you do deal with it. So understanding the biology is really important. That's what today's session did. amazing session, and I really thank everyone to take out time, and all the speakers also. They have done really good justice by making that presentation quite well and informative. So thank you everyone. Lovely session, and hope to have more sessions. As IPN, we try to get different topics. We have been doing that, and we would be doing more such events further also. So thank you everyone. Thank you.
Yeah, so just to tell everybody that we have many more sessions which are already in the pipeline. We'll be posting everything on the group. I understand a lot of participants could not join because we had a restriction of 300 participants in the Zoom link. We will see what best we can do, and we'll get back to all the queries. We'll work out a way, because it becomes very difficult to arrange for recordings for free sessions and also to share it on WhatsApp. So we'll find a way where we are able to, provide you with the information that was done in these sessions. And yeah, stay tuned for many more such sessions. Thank you.
I just wanted to conclude today's session. I just want to leave everybody with one thought. Cravings are not weakness to suppress, but a signal to interpret. Please remember this while you are practicing, while you are dealing with patients. I would also want to thank all of our speakers and all of you participants to take out the time and to attend the session. I hope this was useful, and you will be able to put into practice further. And we, like ma'am said, we do have a lot of other programs coming up. So we want to continue this journey of learning with IPEN as well. So I hope to see you all in further sessions as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay, we can end the meeting.